Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Marvelous Medicine. Dr. Nundy, Dr. Sahni, and Dr. Reddy will be taking us through the journey of how the National Medical Journal started and what is the current state today. Thank you, all of you, for joining me. Though none of you need any introduction, I will go through it just for the formalities. Dr.Samiran Nundy is the Emeritus Consultant of the Department of Surgical Gastroenterology and Liver Transplant at Sir Gangaram Hospital, New Delhi. Dr. Nundy did his undergraduate studies in Cambridge and postgraduate studies in the UK and the USA in Boston. He was the founder professor of the Department of Gastroenterology and Liver Transplantation at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi, and had also worked as a faculty at Cambridge and Harvard. Apart from being an exceptional surgeon and teacher, Dr. Nundy is a medical academic, a writer, and a social activist. He received the Padma Shri in 1985. He has almost 400 publications in national and international journals and has contributed to more than 30 books. He is the founder editor of the National Medical Journal of India and also Tropical Gastroenterology. He was the editor-in-chief of the Current Medical Research and Practice and is also involved with the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics as an editor. His tireless efforts resulted in the Transplantation of Human Organs Act 1994, which made human organ trading illegal in India and recognized brain death as a form of death. He has been a strong advocate of computerization of medical records and clinical audits. He is very outspoken about the corruption in medical practice in India, and the book Healers or Predators ruffled many a feathers. As I mentioned before, today he will be taking us through his journey of starting and running the National Medical Journal of India. Thank you so much, Dr. Samiran Nundy, for supporting all the programs of Learning General Surgery and Marvelous Medicine, and for readily accepting our invitation.
Pleasure to be here.
Dr. Srinath Reddy is the president of Public Health Foundation of India. He did his MBBS from Osmania Medical College, MD Medicine and DM Cardiology from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi, and his MSc Epidemiology from Canada. He was formerly the head of Department of Cardiology at All India Institute, Bernard Lone Visiting Professor of Cardiovascular Health at the Harvard School of Public Health, and presently serves as Adjunct Professor of Epidemiology at Harvard. He is also an Adjunct Professor of the Rollins School of Public Health, Emory University, and Honorary Professor of Medicine at the University of Sydney. He holds several advisory positions in several national and international bodies and is a Padma Bhushan awardee. He has published a book, Make Health in India, Reaching $1 Billion+. Dr. Reddy has also been closely associated with the Dr.Peush Sahni is the professor and head of Department of Gastroenterology at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi. He did his MBBS from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, MS General Surgery, and DNB and PhD in GI Surgery. So Dr. Sahni is an all-in-all All India Institute person. He too has over 390 publications in national and international journals and is the editor of the National Medical Journal. Welcome all of you, and welcome to all the others who have logged in. Over to you, Dr. Nundy.
I think I was wondering why you actually had a program on the National Medical Journal of India. But then I thought I was very proud of the existence of the journal, having completed more than, I think, 32 years. But it all started because in 1986, Stephen Locke, who was the editor of the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, brought a team of 3 people here to Delhi. And they gave a talk, they gave a one-day program on better medical writing. And we thought, I think Piyush was there, but we thought there'd be very few people. And we sent invitations all over, but there were more than 220 editors from all over India who attended, because so it was they were very interested And it was a very good program because it covered all aspects of medical publishing and journalism. And we brought out a book called Better Medical Writing in India, a small little booklet, which unfortunately I can't show here because everyone's got it and it sold very well. But um, during the discussion, there was major sort of questions on why people from third world, especially India, couldn't find a place on medical journals. They worked very hard, they wrote a lot, but none of their papers were published. Now, the reason these people said were mainly three. One was that the science was terrible. Second is that the English was bad and they needed to have very good editing. And the third was that most of the subjects that were dealt with were not of relevance to people in the Western world where most of the readers came. Like nobody in England at that time would be interested in the management of tuberculosis of the intestine because they never saw tuberculosis of the intestine. But what they suggested in the end was that India should have its own medical journal. And the medical journal would be mainly related to Indian diseases, and the main aim was to uplift Indian medicine. So when they left, Dr. Sneh Bhargav, who was director of the All India Institute, asked me, there was no competition, there was no applications to start a new medical journal for India. And so I got, I think, Peush Sahni and Girish Pandey, who were working with me at the time. And we first thought about what to call it. So we thought we'd have a grandiose name, National Medical Journal of India. So when we applied to the Registrar of Newspapers for the name, we were told we can't have it because there's a National Medical Journal of India being published from Bangalore. So we looked up this National Medical Journal of Bangalore, and it had only published one issue and not ever again. That was only issue that it published. So then we were given this name, National Medical Journal of India. Now, how were we going to get contributions? So what we did was we looked up the Cumulated Index Medicus, which in those days were big fat books. And we looked up everyone with an Indian sounding name. And out of 800, we got, we wrote to all of them and we got responses from about 60 saying, we are starting a new journal and it'll be called the National Medical Journal of India. And we'd like to make it of international standards. And would you contribute? So these people from all over, from America, England, Australia, they all agreed to contribute. So we discussed the structure. We followed the structure that most other journals had, and we decided to come out every 2 months. And we were published by the Oxford University Press. Then how do we attract articles? We decided to give money. So I think that Sreenath will correct me, or Piyush will correct me if I'm wrong. I think we decided to give 5,000 rupees for each original article which was published, and we would give the reviewers 1,000 rupees. And I know that this sounds bad, but this is one of the reasons why China, I think, publishes so much of high quality, because they reward people who publish. And we started, and The rest is history. But I must say that although I was editor, the people, we used to have meetings once a week on the journal, but the person who did all the work was Peush Sahni, and he still does all the work. And I was only the figurehead who was editor. So I'm very proud that the journal has survived. And after I left, after 8 years of so-called editing and traveling all over the world, I mean, one of the things that I was involved in was the World Association of Medical Editors. We had a meeting in Bellagio in Italy, which is funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And we established, there were 25 editors from all over the world. And I was the only Indian who was representing the National Medical Journal of India. And this has still continued. And Piyush has recently been, in fact, the president of the World Association of Medical Editors. So I think the main reason why the journal survived was Piyush and, of course, Sreenath, the famous Sreenath, who continued the work. And I'm very proud to have been associated with it. And I thank you for having a program on it. It'll be very interesting for me to look back.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Peush, you were there right from the beginning. So would you like to take us through the journey of how it was to work with Dr. Nundy and start this new journal?
Thank you. Not working with Dr. Nundy, how about the journal? That'd be a long story. Sorry, sir. No, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Radha. Thank you, Dr. Vidya. I've been now at the journal for 35 years. The journal is now in its 35th year of publication. I've had the proud privilege of working under Dr. Nundy and learning all the nitty-gritty of editing, publishing from him and from Professor Srinath Reddy. Both of them are going to be very modest in saying we didn't do much. Piyush used to do most of the work. But the fact is that, you can get a donkey and get him to work, but the donkey doesn't have a brain. So unless somebody guides the donkey and tells the donkey where to go, the donkey will do only the wrong things. So that's what I was. We started off, I must acknowledge that when we started off, we were kind of bonded labor. Dr. Girish Pandey and I, we were residents, and therefore we had little choice but to do what we were asked to do. So we used to
told to do. Asked to do, told to do.
Told to do, ordered to do.
Oh.
So before Professor Nundy took over the National Medical Journal of India, he used to edit a journal called Tropical Gastroenterology, along with Professor B.N. Tandon. And we used to be given articles to go and check a few references. If he found some statement to be out of place in the article, he would send us to the library to go and check that particular reference. We also used to be given once in a while Galley Proofs. I don't know how many people have actually seen Galley Proofs, which was a single column of a sheet of paper and a single column of the journal. And you had to read through that and check for any mistakes. We learned proofreading from him. We learned editing from him. We learned how to review papers from him. And without him, I don't think we would be where we are. The journal has, over the years, progressed in fits and starts. We've gone through good phases and we've gone through bad phases. The journal had a peculiar mix of articles, very different from what a normal pure science. Sorry. From a pure scientific journal. So if you were to look at, something like a pure specialty journal, like say gastroenterology or hepatology, or something along American Journal of Cardiology or Circulation, you'd find original articles and research review articles and short research papers and things like that. But what we had right from the beginning, and this is credit to Dr. Nundy, we had the motto of trying to inform, educate, and entertain. So we had some light-hearted columns, which we still have. We have some serious stuff, which is in the editorials, in the original articles and the review articles, and what we've called short reports, other journals call brief reports. Initially, we never had case reports, but sometime after the start of the journal, we started having case reports. I, in fact, read a book on how important case reports were, and we decided that we should have case reports. We should be selective in our case reports, but we should have case reports. The quotation that I remember related to case reports is that they're the Rolls Royce of medicine. The first case of HIV/AIDS was probably a case report. The case series came later, and the case control studies came even later, and the randomized controlled trials came even later. So if somebody hadn't written up that first case description, then we wouldn't have a description of the disease. And that's why we think it's important to have occasional case reports. We had an interesting section called Controversies and Medicine, which we don't carry nowadays, but we used to have pros and cons on various topics. We introduced something called, or which Professor Nundy introduced, called Indian Medical Colleges, where we requested people from different colleges in India to write up about their own college. We also had a column called Classics in Indian Medicine, where we would reprint papers which were kind of classics, part of the folklore of Indian medicine. So amongst these papers, which we initially published were, the malaria paper by Sir Ronald Ross, the paper by Rustam Jal Vakil on hypertension. So the idea was that to try and get to people information that was old and people didn't have enough detail about those kind of articles. The article itself was not the only thing that we published. We published a small biography of the person who had written the article or the people who had written the article. And in the end, we had, at the end of the article, we had, after reprinting the article, we had an impact written by an expert, a current modern medicine expert on the subject, and how that particular classic had changed the way medicine was practiced. Another classic which we often quote was Professor Ramalinga Swami's paper in the Bulletin of the World Health Organization and in Lancet about the Himalayan goiter. And those are the kind of papers that we published, which were unique in the sense that there weren't too many journals all over the world which did these kind of things. We also had these letters from people from different cities in India and then from abroad, where people doctors who were practicing medicine would write about something topical that had happened in their city related to healthcare. And these letters were very popular and are still very popular. We've had some constant letters. Letter from Mumbai by Professor Sunil Pandya, which has been going on for a long period of time. We then added a letter from Madras, which became letter from Chennai by Professor M.K. Mani from Chennai. And we've had intermittent letters from Glasgow, from London, from Australia, and from various other places. But these unfortunately have not been as permanent in the journal as these two letters have been. We always had a correspondence column, and Professor Nundy believed that if we weren't able to take our own criticism about the journal and publish it in the journal, then that would be unfortunate. And therefore, we had a correspondence column where people could write to us and say what they felt about the journal, what they felt about an article that was published in the journal, and critique that article as well. So the initial years with Professor Nundy at the helm of affairs were years in which we had to work hard. We had no choice. We were given no choice. We were told that you had to do this, and this had to be finished by a certain time. And if it wasn't finished by that time, then you knew what was coming. So therefore, we had little choice but to continue to work and try and do things within a certain time frame. Professor Nundy also, with his great contacts all over the world, very successfully managed to get the journal into the Index Medicus, when at that time there were very few journals from India in the Index Medicus. Now there are a fair number, but at that time there were very few. A few years later, we were successful in getting into the Science Citation Index, and therefore acquiring an impact factor. Not something that we are very proud of, the number that we have in front of the journal, the impact factor, because it's never been very great. The highest we've touched is 1, and there are journals in India which have now crossed 2, and therefore we've lagged behind as far as that is concerned. But we've never run after the impact factor. And we know that our denominator probably comprises of articles which entertain, but don't necessarily get cited. And therefore, because we had this motto of inform, educate, and entertain, and we haven't given up the entertaining aspect, there are obviously times when our denominator is not going to take our impact factor very high. Over the years, the journal has increased the number of pages that it published. We started off with 48 pages. We now do 64 pages. We used to do 6 issues in a year. We've continued to do 6 issues in a year. And that's largely because we all who work with the journal have our own busy work schedules other than the journal. And the journal is really a hobby that we all stick to and do in our spare time. And therefore, it's just been very difficult to try and convert the journal from 6 issues in a year to 12 issues in a year. And we've continued to publish 6 issues in a year. I wish at some point in time the journal would become monthly and maybe even a fortnightly and a weekly even after that. But it's not going to happen in the time that I have with the journal. So we've innovated. We've grown as we went by. We created a website. The initial attempts were to create the website ourselves. We tried to get a submission peer review system and a submission system, online submission system. When other journals got it, we thought we should also have it. And we again tried to create one ourselves and learned the hard way that that was not our core strength. And we should let somebody else who's better at it do that piece of work for us. So we learned through our mistakes, and therefore we lagged behind in these aspects for some period of time. We're not very active on social media up till now, but we now have a team together, which hopefully in the next 2 months will have a presence on Twitter of the National Medical Journal of India, something that most journals around the world have. We have an online submission system, which is fairly efficient at this point in time. However, we are still dependent on our reviewers. Some of our reviewers are excellent, but some of our reviewers are not so excellent, at least as far as time frames go. And if they were to send their own paper for review to a journal, they would want a reply the next day. But when they review for others, they tend to take their own time. Unfortunately, that does put off authors. It puts off authors all over the world. But unfortunately, there's little that editors can do except to chase reviewers and change reviewers. Sometimes each of these attempts may not be very successful. So these are some of our drawbacks, our limitations within which we work. We have over the years not grown by the number of subscribers that we have. But what we have seen over a period of time is that because we are largely open access, people can go to our website and without making any payments, read the journal. We do offer a subscription-based print subscription of the journal as well, and we've had that right from the beginning. But the web version is free and open access. Therefore, our subscribers have been limited, and that's been the experience of most open access journals, that they won't get too many print subscribers. So the print subscribers are largely from institutions rather than from individuals. Institutions which have to show to regulatory authorities that they subscribe to a certain number of journals for their students. So I think over a period of time, the journal has progressed. It's made some mistakes along the line, rectified them slowly, but steadily. We've progressed, we've moved. We used to have under 100 submissions when we started in a year. We now have close to 1,000 submissions in a year. That means 3 submissions every day. The workload obviously increases multifold for our reviewers as well as for the editors, as well as the working committee and the editorial board. We started off with a small number of people working on the journal. We've grown. We now have 4 associate editors who work with the journal. Professor Nikhil Tandon, Professor Pratap Sharan, Professor Rajiv Kumar, and Professor Rakesh Loda. So we have a urologist, a pediatrician, a psychiatrist, and an endocrinologist on the working committee. So we cover a fair amount of ground because of this. I think I'll stop here and would be happy to take questions later on after Professor Srinath Reddy has spoken. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peush Sahni, for joining despite your personal circumstances. Over to you, Dr. Srinath Reddy. You need to unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you. My own journey with the journal has been somewhat different from what Peush has stated when he said that he was commandeered into becoming an able assistant of Dr. Nundy and was a choiceless bonded labor, but the labor of love grew into a love affair which continued in Peush's life. I came in because I was a great fan of Dr. Nundy. I am still a great fan of Dr. Nundy, but I'm talking about how my association started with the National Medical Journal of India. Unlike Peush, who did all his medical training at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and Professor Nundy, who did his medical training elsewhere in other institutions and came to All India Institute as a consultant and a teacher, I was sort of in between. I did my medical undergraduate training in Hyderabad, then I did my postgraduate training in medicine and cardiology in the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So in that sense too, I was an in-betweener, not entirely from All India Institute, but also very much influenced by the All India Institute. So when I started my postgraduate training in medicine, and I was asked to present a case, an unusual presentation of thyroid storm from Professor M.M.S. Ahuja's unit in the clinical combined round. Then at the end of the presentation that I made, we had Dr. Nundy getting up and asking, what is the Wolff-Chekhov effect? I'd made the mistake of mentioning that in my presentation, but Professor Nundy had this habit of asking, of course, out of curiosity and sometimes out of challenge, rather inconvenient questions sitting in the front row of the faculty. And then for a moment, I thought I would get totally stumped, but somehow I managed to get my answer out. And apparently he liked it. And then we continued an association, but more importantly, I was remarkably impressed repeatedly by the manner in which he would ask probing questions, not in order to critique in any put down manner, but essentially to try and unravel the things that were being discussed in any clinical combined round, and not necessarily overawed by the personality of any speaker, but essentially in order to draw out the information and knowledge, which actually benefited everybody else sitting in that room. So being a fan of Dr. Nundy, when he asked me to join him as an associate editor And that was just when I was returning from Canada after doing my training in epidemiology. I was already a faculty member in cardiology. I had absolutely no hesitation in joining because I had so much of admiration for him that I decided that I must enjoy the opportunity of working with him. And the concept of the National Medical Journal of India, as he introduced it, was a remarkable concept, not the traditional scientific journal churning out a number of very rich but turgid scientific articles and some reviews, and of course, possibly some editorial commentaries, but offering a much wider variety, a much greater fare. And as they said, to educate and to stimulate, yes, but also to provoke. The journal would not have been a journal run by Dr. Nundy if it did not provoke. So it needed to be provocative as well. So that was the philosophy behind, in order to try and bring everybody and then get a discussion started. And the wide variety of features in the content that Peush described, they indeed represented a diversity of facets of the medical profession and of public health too, which were very important for people to understand, to debate, and to discuss. I've always said that science is sterile if it lacks social relevance. And therefore, bringing in science and society also into the pages, that is what it was called, medicine and society and science and society, these were all the things that were brought in as features. When I came back from Canada after doing my training in clinical epidemiology, Dr. Nundy invited me to write a series of articles on clinical research methodology, which I thoroughly enjoyed and which were an additional feature in the journal. There were so many features that were there, which Peush described, which were absolutely superb in very many ways, each of them stimulating, whether it was description of medical colleges, which gave us a rich history of the medical colleges of India, or whether it was the selected summaries which offered an opportunity for people to not only summarize the results of an important article, but to critique it methodologically and explain what the implications for policy and practice were. I think all of these were very rich contributions, and I'm not particularly disappointed if the impact factor didn't cross 1, because I think it made a contribution in terms of how it stimulated minds. That was much more important than gathering a couple of more points in the impact factor. When Dr. Nundy left the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, I was asked to take over as the editor. I was reluctant because firstly, I was getting extremely busy. And secondly, I felt Peush was the right person. Peush was actually carrying the brunt of the work. And I thought he was the person who was best equipped to be the editor of the journal. So when Professor Lalit Bhutani, who was the acting director, even the dean, but he became the acting director for a few months or a few weeks till the next director selection was finalized, called me to his office and said, we want you to be the editor. Your name has been recommended. I said, sorry, I can't take it up because I'm getting very busy with lots of other things. I can't do that. So he said, look, there are some faculty members who are very keen on becoming the editors. But I am aware that they are unlikely to carry on the traditions that Dr. Nundy has set. They are more likely to use the journal for promoting their own images and building their own connections, which indeed has been the fate of many Indian journals. Quite often the editor uses it for patronage or promotion of one's own image, which is very unfortunate. And I've seen that happen to some of the Indian journals. So like Dr. Bhutani said, I don't want that to happen. If the journal has to carry on the tradition, then your succession is seen as a natural choice because you are the associate editor. The moment I throw it open, there'll be all kinds of competition and the journal will lose its stature and standards. So I said, okay, if that is the situation, then let me do it. And I think I had a talk with Dr. Nundy as well. And I did rather reluctantly step into Dr. Nundy's large shoes. But mine was essentially a function in which I wanted Peush to continue to manage the journal with all the ability and commitment that he had, while I protected the journal and try to provide whatever little assistance and guidance that he needed. And of course, with the help of others as well. So if Dr. Nundy formed the DNA of the journal, I was merely the messenger RNA carrying that message to the ribosomes, which Peush represented to create the proteins of the journal. So mine was essentially that kind of a transitory connection. But nevertheless, I tried to do that and protected the journal as much as I could and kept it as free and objective, free from influence, external influences, and as objective as possible during that period. And it was a very enjoyable period, working with Peush, working with a number of other colleagues. And I must give credit to Mrs. Savitri Sinha, who managed the office extremely well and with a great deal of care, despite all the confusion that we created with our busy schedules. And to the excellent editorial team, originally from Oxford University Press and later on Byword, Mr. Dinesh Sinha and others, who did really create a unique image for the way the journal was crafted and printed. And Dinesh was particularly obsessive about his editing, about trimming things in size and making sure that every word was perfect. So there was a lot of things that I learned myself and enjoyed thoroughly during that process. But finally, after a very enjoyable period, and as I said, I liked some of the sections particularly which were challenging in terms of medicine and society and many other areas which are not conventionally put in journals. But when I finished my some years, I don't even remember how many, possibly 10, of staying with the journal and protecting the journal as an editor, essentially fronting for Peush, I then left the position and then went and told the then director that this time there is no reason why Peush Sahni can't be the editor, because he is now senior enough to ward off any challenges and he is the natural successor. So let him take it up. And that's how Peush became the editor, and I'm delighted that he did. But as I said, my job was essentially to carry the torch from Dr. Nundy to Peush and make sure that the journal continued its traditions and lived up to its reputation and maintained the promise that it initially gave when it ventured out of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences to become the National Medical Journal of India. So back to you.
Yeah, before we proceed, I request Dr. Nundy to say about the role of Mrs. Savitri Dasina in the journal, because she's been there all through. We all know her very well.
I think the journal could not have been run without Mrs. Sinha. We used to call her all the time, and she used to unfortunately go and check every wretched reference that was in the original article, and half of them were wrong. And she also did a number of studies, and I think she got a PhD at the end, but she also did one study, I remember, that about Indian reviewers compared with foreign reviewers. You know, we used to send every original article and review to one Indian and one foreign reviewer. And we found, then we used to give them marks for the quality of the review, and we used to see how long it would take for the review. And we found, unfortunately, unexpectedly, that the foreigners were much better than Indians. And in those days, they would send the review by post and not internet. And this has been quoted many times. And I remember going to Prague or someplace, staying at the Hilton in some review. There's some peer review congress. And I think Mrs. Sinha or I presented this paper with a lot of discussion. But my general feeling, I must say, is that I don't think that we've made such a great impact on Indian medical research and publication. And we did, I was editing another journal from Gangaram, and we did this great study on publication, Scopus publications from Indian medical colleges. And we found that out of 700 or something, 570 medical colleges, 57% had not published a single paper in 10 years. And I think this is the kind of thing that we should think about rather than only the National Medical Journal of India and how it stands in the larger context and how we should go forward from here. My feeling, and I've said this before, is that we should follow the Chinese example. I talked to a Chinese chap and he said, how do you get, they were about 20 years ago, they produced 1.4%, 1% of all the cited publications in the world. And India produced 1.4. Now China is 10%. I think it's second only to the America, which is something like 25%. I asked him, how did this work? He said that if you publish a paper in Nature, then the government gives you your entirely annual salary. And I think we need carrot and we need stick. The carrot should be either genuine assessment of merit, including publication, and the stick should be that if you don't publish or don't do research as a faculty member, you should go somewhere else. And I think really the National Medical Journal of India should look into this problem.
Ms. Savitri, we'd like to hear from you about how it was to work with such pioneers. Could you please unmute yourself?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for asking me to say a few words. When I started working with, when I joined AIIMS, I had worked earlier with private publishing houses. And before joining, everybody started saying that, oh, Dr. Nundy was a very hard taskmaster. So I said, okay, I want someone like him to work with. And these sections actually that I'm not a doctor, I am a doctorate. My specialization is history. So these sections that we had in the journal, that is a general medical journal, it's a general medical journal. So the sections that actually I was interested in were the classics in Indian medicine, the Indian medical colleges, medicine and society, speaking for myself, of course, letters from London, because, this earlier also in pre-independent era, this Indian Medical Gazette was there, and there also they used to have this this letters from London. And so all these things I found quite interesting, and working with Dr. Nundy was very, very useful in the sense he always inspired me to work and get into research. And that ultimately, probably this paper on peer review, the exchange of peer reviewers' comments actually was presented at the second or third International Congress of Peer Review. And the thing is, even after that, I started working on medical journals. And Dr. Nundy, from this peer review comments, I started giving a close look at the comments sent by the peer reviewers and how to do the reviews. And that actually helped me in ultimately doing my research. So I learned a lot from this. And of course, this references many people feel, and many people talk about references. Oh, it's so easy these days to do the references. There are so many softwares, but actually Dr. Nundy used to send me to NML, and and he would say, you do the, you check the references, and at the end of the day, after coming back from OPD or OT, you would check, and I would discuss the references, that these are the mistakes in the sense, the text and the reference, often never used to tally. And now also, I'm sure this problem is there. And after that, Dr. Nundy left for Gangaram, and Dr. Reddy came. And with Dr. Reddy, he had a lot of interest in public health issues, and that helped me in, knowing and reading his articles and, his interest. When I used to go with him with the files, he used to be very busy, but even then I found that, a sort of inspiration I got to work into this journal. And that is perhaps one of the reasons why I continue to, work in the National Medical Journal of India, because people were so cooperative. And Dr. Peush Sahni, of course, from day one, because when I joined AIIMS, the day I joined, Dr. Nundy wasn't there. He was out of the country. And so Dr. Peush signed my joining letter. And since then, he had been very, very cooperative. Whenever there was any problem, whether it is personal or official, always used to help and come forward to help, me. So it is without this sort of teamwork, the editors also being cooperative to the juniors, it is not possible for anybody to function. And so I would say that it is very important for the editors, and the editors are all offering voluntary services. It is from their, they never neglected their clinical work. In fact, they're the top ones in that field. And despite that, they gave so much time to the journal. So these are certain things that I learned, and I enjoyed working with NMJI. And though I have retired, I'm still continuing to work and feel happy to be associated with NMJI.
Vidya, may I say something?
Yes, sir.
And that is that we mustn't forget of the strong support we had from the British Medical Journal, starting with Stephen Locke, Richard Smith, Fiona Godley. If we didn't have a reviewer, we used to send it to the BMJ, and they used to get a reviewer for us. And they really did a great deal for us. And the second thing that I want to say is that I think that Piyush deserves great credit that the best ever meeting that I attended, I think unfortunately the Meridian, was organized by Piyush on research and publication of journals. When he was, I think, the president of the World Association of Medical Editors. And these two things, I think that we must record our thanks to the BMJ and to Piyush for getting all these people together for this great meeting of the World Association of Medical Editors.
Thank you, sir. We are happy to have Dr. B.S. Ramakrishna with us, who was the editor of the Indian Journal of Gastroenterology. Dr. Ramakrishna, we'd like to hear from you. Could you please unmute yourself, sir?
Yeah, so thank you so much. It's been great listening to Dr. Nundy, to Dr. Reddy, and to Piyush. Yeah, so this is a challenge that journals in India particularly have, that Indians in general feel it's more prestigious to publish in journals outside of India, in international journals, essentially because they have a higher impact factor. And it helps them in their careers, it helps them in their visibility as a scientist and so on. I think we're all guilty of this. So the challenge has been to get people within India to submit their papers to an Indian journal. And so from the perspective of the Indian Journal of Gastroenterology, which I was the editor for 2 terms of 8 years, what we did was to say that papers presented at the plenary session of the Indian Society of Gastroenterology should really be published in the Indian Journal of Gastroenterology. And to get a little bit of things like that, to get some people from outside the country also to publish their papers in our journals actually adds eventually to the impact factor of the journal and improves, perceptually at least, the quality of the journal. So that's basically the findings that I had. In order to chase after impact factors, we did a lot of things, and I am glad to hear Peush say that they had chats and they had various other things which actually detract from the impact factor, because they add to the denominator, but not to the numerator. You see, you need certain things on the numerator, which are the good ones, which are the much cited ones, and everything else you published is the denominator. So when you have articles like that, your impact factor is bound to go down. So at one point of time at the IJG, we consciously took a decision not to publish case reports, although until that time, case reports were widely published. So the second thing that we sought to improve the standing of the journal was to look for international publishers. So we went to Springer Nature. And that's actually helped in getting visibility. The third thing which we've talked about for a long time is to see whether we should take out the name Indian, because it sounds as if it is kind of restricted only to people from India. And I guess the same criticism can be made for the NMJI, that if you say India, people think only people from India should submit papers there. Unfortunately, it turns out that changing a journal's name is not easy. It used to be easy in the olden days. I've known many journals which changed their names. But in the current scenario, to change a journal's name has become very difficult, because you have to go to the PubMed and you have to say that I will do this, etc., etc. So they need to keep track of what you wear before you change your name. So these are things that are challenges for any editor, and particularly if you're trying to get your journal to come up and be on par with any kind of international journal. Thank you. I'll stop there.
As always, we have Professor Ananthakrishnan supporting us during all our sessions. Dr. Ananthakrishnan, like you all know, has published, has edited, has reviewed the work. So, AK sir, your thoughts on National Medical Journal? Dr. Ananthakrishnan.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Can't see you though.
If you wish to, you can also see me now. Right. The thing is that over the years, I have read a lot of articles which have come in the National Medical Journal of India. My tenure at All India Institute, when I completed my PG, that was the time when Dr. Nundy joined. I had just starting my senior residency, and he joined as a faculty there. And I was witness to those questioning sessions which Sreenath mentioned. And we used to always, at the end of the presentation, look towards Nundy, and he will start the ball rolling by asking the first question, very often a question which you had to take time to comprehend. But he was a hero to many of us. And when this venture started, and it was Personally, I thought it was a great journal because it had so many things of interest. And over the years, I have done a lot of review for articles in the NMGI, and more recently, I seem to do a lot of review of articles on medical education for NMGI. I think Piyush sends me many of those, and I try to avoid delaying it, as he mentioned. Send it back as soon as possible. But impact factor is, I think, there's a lot of deficiencies. You know, a lot depends on the audience that you are targeting and the topic that you are writing about, and its usefulness to many other people. So I don't think that is the metric to judge the journal by. The readability should be good. It should have a wide spectrum of articles which are of interest across the profession and which are of interest across the subjects. And the NMDI fulfills those norms. And I think it's a great journal, and all the three people who have been associated with it and Dr. Savitri, of course, have brought it where it is today. And I think it's an endeavor that all of us as physicians in this country must be proud of. And they need to be congratulated. I've interacted with Piyush many times in the recent past, and I know the effort that he puts into the journal, and I think it's a laudable endeavor, and I hope many others will take this to their heart and do something for some of the other professional journals. My own surgical journal, over the years we have seen it's languishing behind for reasons which I can never really understand. And I think the NMGI should serve as a model for some of those journals, and they should rise to higher levels. Thanks, Vidya, for asking me to speak, but I never edited the journal, so I can't give you the inside story of what it takes. I've been a contributor and a reviewer. That's all.
Dr. Peush, after having listened to the other members of your team, is there something you'd like to add at this point? You are muted, sir.
Unfortunately, the time my video was off was I was on the phone trying to solve some issues. So I missed some of those conversations.
So 2 points I can bring to your notice is what Dr. Ramakrishna is commenting, that Indians would like to publish in journals abroad than Indian journals, and the name of calling it National Medical Journal of India, the India, you know, it sort of gives a narrower approach to the rest of the world. I mean, the 2 points you can start with, so maybe Dr. Nundy.
So I'd like to respond to both of those. So I know of journals which have deliberately taken the name India out of their journal because their publishers have advised them to do so, because it will be easier to get their journals into an indexing service. I think indexing services also look for regional and local journals. Whether it's Index Medicus, whether it's Scopus, whether it's anybody else, they are all looking for a wide geographical representation. But what they are looking at when they're looking at National Medical Journal of India, they're looking at whether we publish only from India or we publish from elsewhere. Do we get reviewers only from India or do we get reviewers from elsewhere? Do we have on our editorial board only people from India and from Indian medical colleges, or we have people from outside the country as well contributing to the journal? I think that's what makes an international journal. I've been asked this question on multiple workshops by students. What is a national journal? What is an international journal? And my answer to them is, please ask the people who tell you to tell them, who ask you to tell them which of your papers are published in national journals and which are published in international journals. Because I don't know what is a national journal and what is an international journal. Is Indian Journal of Gastroenterology a national journal? Possibly no, because Indian Journal of Gastroenterology has an editorial board which is international. It has people from Indians settled abroad as well as others on the editorial board. There are people who publish in that journal who are not necessarily from India. Even if they have Indian sounding names, then they're probably second generation Indians settled elsewhere. And, it's the editor who's been inviting them to write, or they're submitting on their own. There are people from all over the world who are now submitting to all kinds of journals. So what is a national journal? What is an international journal is something that is beyond me. So I personally think that we should be proud of the fact that we have a National Medical Journal of India. We should be proud of the fact that this journal is considered to be an international journal because it has an international editorial board, it has an international authorship, it has an international reviewership. That's enough to call it international. And if people still insist on calling it a national journal, I'm sorry, I can't quarrel with them, and I will not quarrel with them.
I don't think the name itself should be such a deterrent. The New England Journal of Medicine is not even a national journal.
Correct. It's a
regional provincial journal. And the Journal of American Medical Association, again, is a sort of a national journal. But the important thing is, if you can actually get good articles from everybody and make it appear relevant to many people outside the boundaries of the country, that's very good. Or even people who are interested in Indian affairs, in Indian issues, if they would like to look at it as a possible reference journal, that's also very good. But I think, as you rightly pointed out, it is this consistent commitment to offer a variety rather than necessarily go in search of an impact factor by sacrificing some of the elements of the journal that have actually made it a very different journal.
So if I would like, I'd like to reframe the question that was asked before. So Dr. Peush, what does the National Medical Journal of India do to encourage Indians to submit their papers to you rather than to, within quotes, international journal? That is a journal published from outside India.
So to be very honest, we don't really entice people nowadays because we have enough submissions. As I said, we have about 1,000 submissions, and we can publish only 10% of these 1,000 submissions. So we really don't need to encourage people to submit. But whenever we do workshops, whenever we do workshops on writing, workshops on publishing, workshops on research, we suggest to people that material that is relevant to the national scene should be published in a national journal. The argument that I have come across a number of times, and I don't have an answer to that, is the National Medical Journal of India probably gets read by fewer people than the number of people who read the New England Journal of Medicine, the BMJ, and the Lancet in India. Now, if that is true, I don't have statistics, but if that is true, then I can quite understand people wanting to go and publish in the Lancet, in the BMJ, and in the New England Journal of Medicine. But I cannot understand people publishing in the Turkish Journal of Anesthesia, in the Brazilian Journal of Surgery, so that I can't understand. There you should get, I would much rather people published in the Indian Journal of Surgery, much rather that they published in the Indian Journal of whichever specialty. If they are not able to get to the international, true high impact, high quality, number 1, number 2, number 3 journals in their specialty, then they should come back to an Indian journal and publish there. Because there'll be more people who understand your material, who will read you, rather than elsewhere. I'm not saying you should not attempt to publish in high quality journals. You should, because that is what all of us, we want to do high quality research, get our research across to a larger audience, and that's what we all work for. So you should get to a larger audience, and you should get to a more international audience and a wider readership, yes. And some of our Indian journals may not be able to do that. But I'm sure the Brazilian journal, the Turkish journal, or the Saudi Arabian journal, or the Middle Eastern journal don't necessarily have that wider readership as an Indian journal has. So from that point of view, I personally think that people who continue to submit to an international journal do it more because their regulatory requirements, their institutional requirements their promotional requirements require them to publish in an international journal, and therefore they look for a journal which is outside the country and don't want to publish in a journal which has the name India attached to it.
Can I just say that you mentioned the Transplant of Human Organs Act. Now, I think that when we were at the All India Institute, we thought when we set up surgical gastroenterology, that Piyush, Girish, and I thought that we should start liver transplant. But we should, there was no brain death law, the paying for organs was rife, and we attacked this problem not only outside, but very strongly through articles in the National Medical Journal of India. And I think the National Medical Journal of India, with editorials and other articles against organ trading and in favor of brain death, has changed that the passage of the law has changed Indian medicine to a large extent, or at least had a great influence. And this is all because we had a vehicle which was widely recognized to put our thoughts into.
Dr. Vidya, I'd request permission to leave. My apologies, but I have a problem at home which I need to resolve. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining despite your problem, and we will catch you again on some other episode. Thank you so much. Dr. Peush Sahni mentioned that that National Medical Journal doesn't have a very high subscriber base for the print version, because it's an open source journal and the electronic version is viewed by all. So I'd like to ask Dr. Nundy and Dr. Reddy, and somebody in the audience has also asked, what do you think is the future of the print journal, say 10, 20 years from now?
Well, can I start?
Yes, sir.
We've recently done a book on how to practice academic medicine and publish in the developing world. And it's quite a good book. It's with Bhutta, Zulfikar Bhutta from Toronto and Pakistan. And the Springer said that if you publish it in book form, it'll cost 11,000 rupees per copy. If you give us 12.5 lakhs, we will make it open access, and the price of the book will go down to 3,500. So we got hold of 12.5 lakhs from Cipla, Dabur, and these places. And in 2 months, in the open access version, there are 133,000 downloads. And I can't tell you how many print copies have been sold. I've bought the largest number, but it's a huge number of downloads that if you want people to actually read, you should go to open access nowadays. And my residents say that they don't read print copies. They only read online. Sreenath.
So you need to unmute, Dr. Srinath.
I would agree. I think all of us have now become much more comfortable in reading journals online. I also remember that as a postgraduate student in All India Institute, apart from the B.B. Dikshit Library, when we had to go into the dusty shelves of the National Medical Journal of India and locate a journal, and like sometimes find that somebody has come before us and torn some pages of some articles, then there is no way you can try and retrace that article. So I think having an electronic journal to access makes life easy in so many ways. I think that's the future going to be. It may be comforting sometimes to hold a journal and leaf through the pages. Like it's always nice to hold a book and read it. But in terms of journals, I think it's going to be definitely online in the future.
Vidya, you need to unmute.
There is an interesting question in the chat box, which and I had the same thought running. If we make everything open access, how do you get funding for your journal, and how do you justify the subscribers, the ones who have subscribed and pay for the journal?
Dr. Nundy.
I think, you know, I was on the editorial board of the British Medical Journal for 8 years or so. And I think that the print version goes to all the doctors in England with something like 80,000. But the online subscribers is 4 times the number. Unfortunately, I think the BMJ, you have to pay for, it's not open access, but you have to pay, but it's much less than buying the print version. In the near future, I think there'll be very few print journals and they'll be mainly online.
Thank you, sir. Ghosh, would you like to come in at this point? You've heard all of them speak.
Yeah, Ghosh, please introduce yourself.
I'm Amit Ghosh. I'm actually the classmate of Patta and Vidya from JIPMER, and finally trained in PGI Chandigarh under Professor Chugh. And then I'm now a professor of medicine in Mayo Clinic. I have met Dr. Reddy in one of the API conferences. I'm just recalling an interview which Kapil Dev had with Anupam Kher. And Kapil Dev said that, you know, you should not try to copy the geniuses. You should just be a good player, learn the solid skills. So when I see somebody like Dr. Nundy, Dr. AK, and Dr. Reddy, whom I've met, these are geniuses. So very hard to know how they run their life, how they have done it. But having said that, in Mayo Clinic, we have a Mayo Clinic proceedings. And initially, the rumor was that it's a low-level journal. You know, you have to go outside and publish elsewhere. If you publish in Mayo Clinic proceedings, you won't be viewed as a mega star in Mayo Clinic. That turned out to be wrong because of the changes which has happened. In 2004, we published an article called Futon Bias, which is called Full-Time Online Bias. And we found out that articles which journals which after they had their articles present full text in a website or in their website, their impact factor went up, not because the quality of the article was any different, but because it became more visible, which is what Dr. Nundy and Dr. Reddy is now saying. Every journal is now online, and now you're caught up with the whole thing of excesses. Having said that, what Professor Nundy has done and Dr. Reddy has done is like, you're a cricket player, you're a wicket keeper, you're a batsman, you're a bowler, you're a fielder, you're a manager. So that's not possible. That's the expectation of an editor in Indian journal to do all, and that becomes humongous. So having the leadership of the institution think about prospectively that this is the person who's going to do it. So they have to free up their space from surgery and other things, or other administrative time has to be given specifically supporting the editor to do the stuff they're doing. Now, how do we publish here? And I would say we have a whole team of people. There are 4 or 5 people working on a project. And we have a PhD in almost like Mrs. Dr. Savitri Sinha, who's the English major, who corrects the paper. We have a Mayo Publishing editing factors. Well, after we collect the data, we have a statistician who does their stuff. So everybody is doing their stuff. A batsman is doing the batting stuff. The bowler is doing the batting stuff. When I used to work in University of Minnesota in the nephrology department, the transplant team had an article come out every, according to the math, every 2 hours or so because of this phenomenon of publication. How is it valued? How is it critiqued? My experience has been that in AIIMS and PGI, we used to have a bulletin PGI, we over-criticize. In fact, I can guarantee you that there are faculty member who is telling at this point their faculty not to publish in NAMI and to publish elsewhere because it is so-called, you have to know somebody or it's not that fashionable. And that's so unfortunate. I know the editor of Lancet, who's now in China, based in China. And the reason they have negotiating with China, Lancet has an office, NEJM also probably has an office, is they have huge database. And so they have provided the statistical, the know-how, how to write epidemiological support, while China has all this huge database where they have all these cases. I have in my hand a paper in New England Medical Journal published by Dr. Himran Bavaskar. It's on scorpion innovation. The reason I read his name was he got Padma Shri this year. So I was trying to read what he has done. He published in JAPI, he published in all the Indian journals before it was taken over by international journals. So he's a world expert in this era, in this field. So we have world experts. My boss, Dr. Chuk, was a world expert in snake bite venom causing acute cortical necrosis, causing renal failure, and he was known all over. So we have such huge database. The editor knows it, might have to be a political person and also have to have all these contacts, both in the country and elsewhere, to get these people to write for their journals, to connect. And how does he do it? If he has to do the whole thing by themselves, from cricketing to batting to bowling to wicketing. So that is the challenge of India. We are great people, we have known great things, but we are still in the same circle, because you take the best talent like Dr. Nundy, you take the best talent like Dr. Reddy, but put them in an impossible situation. There are only 24 hours a day that they can do. So there has to be an increased commitment like China has done and also has done. I won't belittle Saudi Arabia or Middle East, because I'm seeing they're doing the same thing. They're getting big organizations there, and visibility is coming from their connection with these authors. They're getting mega authors, mega people to visit them. So visibility is what counts. How you sell, how your own people see your journal, it counts. Mayo Proceedings now, I will tell you, our staff is vying to get an article in Mayo Proceedings. The impact factor is, I think, now 7. It used to be very low in the past. Because of this, and a lot of external articles are coming into Mayo Proceedings. So it's a very difficult journal, a very difficult task to be an editor, because you take the position and then you are besieged by seeing so many different things, from impact factor to visibility to change of name of the journal to whatever. And you do your best you can, but you're already catching up, and you have no support. And so it becomes extremely, so my hats off to these 3 giants and the gastroenterologist who is an editor. It's a very difficult journal, but let me tell you about the work that the editors are doing. They are making careers, they are making impact, they're making people rise up. So it's not only a powerful position from the editor, from the work they're doing, but also their contribution to Indian medicine, Indian surgery, when they have the talent to get the right people to publish and getting the right. So the case report on scorpion bite becomes a full-paged article in New England Journal. That's how it happens, because an editor felt that that was important, and that's prevalent in India. So all that has been said is correct, but I don't know how you can change the current scenario unless you have a mega thinking in Indian medicine, that if you have to compete with the West, you have to be as good. You have the talent. Neeraj Chopra comes here he's been overwhelmed. He's picked up 10 pounds or 15 pounds of weight with all the food he has had after he won the Olympics. So he's training in California for the next. He was not there for Padma Shri, he's not there for anything. So if you have to compete with the West, you have to know what the competition is like. And you have all the raw materials there, all the brilliant people there. Just have to make sure that the leaders make these changes so that you are really at par. And once these things happen in India, there is no stepping aside as to what you can do. But it's a very hard job for the editors, I must say. They're criticized. Whatever they do, it's always going to be looked upon by their own friends, own institutions. And my hats off that they have been able to be in this position for years and years and years. These are some of the, I know it was a winded comment, but I thought what I'm seeing the trend. The other thing which Mayo Proceedings has done is putting podcasts, putting other forms of things, the summary statement. So the impact, an article comes out, they have the author blurb out like within 3 minutes or 4 minutes. What's the essence of the article? NEJM has done that. All these articles have done that. That's to get the viewership interested. There has to be a hook to get the people interested. There has to be more than what it is. And on top of that, you have to get the funding from somewhere to keep it going. If your article is cited, nobody buys reprints anymore, but that's another thing. So it's a challenge, but it's going to survive because scholars have to publish. It will survive, but we have to evolve. You can't be status quo. Thank you.
Yeah. If anyone else has any questions or comments, please feel free to speak. Meanwhile, Radhakrishna, what made you choose this? As Dr. Nundy asked right in the beginning, how come you thought of doing this?
Actually, learning general surgery has been trying hard to, bring in the best of teachers into this forum and, make people know that, so many good things exist. Actually, Dr. Nundy has always been larger than life for all of us. He still is. And, we could go nowhere near him those days. And the talents he has are innumerable, and at this age he works almost round the clock. And NMJ is a lovely journal. Actually, I smelled, I felt, I looked at it, and as Dr.Srinath says, it's a very milky white cover, and the print is excellent. That was so many years ago. It's one of the very good printed journals, and Dr. Nundy used to discuss about this journal among us, about adding a column called Masala, then a letter from Chennai. And it's a very readable journal for us also those days. And we also did a little bit of cross-reference checking, and, under the leadership of Dr. Nundy, we were more scared than, dedicated many a times. So National Medical Journal is one of the top journals in India. And the thing that really made me think of this is Dr. Peush's dedication. I always wanted to know what satisfaction does he get by doing this. He does, I don't think any other human being can do as much as Dr. Peush did for a journal. And then the pleasure he takes is a very unsung hero. And Dr. Nundy had so many good words to say about it. And that is the reason I thought actually Dr. Nundy has been working very hard on creating the interest in research in India, and how research can be done, and how research can increase in India. I think he's trying his level best. I don't think any other individual in India is doing as much as he's doing. And these two things put together, I thought we should introduce a National Medical Journal to a larger audience. Vidya.
One of the questions, if I may ask.
And Srinath, we can't hear you.
No. I'm unmuted. Unmute again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Well, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, what do you think preprints are going to be doing to journals which are already established? Are they passing fancy? Will they actually reduce the amount of value that journals will have when they actually print the original article later on? The culture of preprints that has come in with COVID in particular. Though other sciences have always had preprints. I mean, physics and mathematics have had non-peer-reviewed things put out and then attract criticism from peers and then modified the article. So how do you think medicine is going to alter its ways?
So, Dr. Nundy, would you like to respond to that?
I'm against preprints. I think you're getting an article, you're saying an article is basically published without having peer review. And anyone can, I think, isn't that right, Srinath?
Yeah.
That you can put up the article whenever you want. And we must have gatekeepers, because like the difference between New England Journal of Medicine or National Medical Journal of India compared with Google is that Google, you can write anything. Whereas in New England Journal of Medicine and National Medical Journal of India, you have to go through the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is the editor, the peer reviewers, and back to the editor. So they protect us from false allegations, from rubbish. So they tell us what is good and what is not. And preprint, you cannot distinguish between what is worthwhile and what is not.
No, I fully agree. But then, do you think preprints will fade away after the COVID pandemic disappears? Or like T20 cricket following Test cricket, it's going to stay on?
Dr. Anandkrishnan wants to say something about this.
No.
Okay. Ghosh, you have a comment on
Can
this?
I make a point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I am Dr. Kohli. I am medical educationist. I have worked more with Savitri and associated with NMDI, especially for the medical education section. The two great contributions of NMDI, as far as I am concerned, is first is opening a column on medical education. Every issue will have at least 2 articles devoted to medical education. This is a very good opening for aspirants in medical education, which have been publication. The second one is that a series of workshops on scientific writing, which used to be held in CMET, and I was to be in charge of the CMET. So it was a very good contribution, because ultimately we have to train the community of not only residents, writers, authors, editors, and reviewers. The more you handhold, the more you sensitize them, it will yield a very rich dividend. Now, my point is suggestion is medical education is a very, very gold mine of opportunities which is untapped in India. Because Dr. Nundy has written long back that the number of publications are extremely small and it is unacceptable. Now the things are changing. I had the figures very recently. From 2000 to 2010, we had 1,163 papers published in medical education. Whereas from 2011 to 20, the number rose to 2,782, nearly 3,000 papers in medical education. Why this has happened? This has happened because of a lot of factors which are involved, including, the starting of the FAMER fellowship. Some of the health sciences universities started their own courses. Then MCI made a mandatory to consider the education papers, and they also established regional centers. And regional centers will have another set of publications, and the publications of entities and all. It's a collective effort of so many agencies which have evidenced interest for a long time. But now we are reaping the benefit of rich publication. Now, if NMDI, instead of reaching only to 2 articles, because now we are talking about open access, we are talking about the e-editions, the cost will not really matter. But you can capture a very large number of audience who are starved for publication. Because in medical education, there is absolutely no single journal, only journal is there. It is educational health sciences. It was actually abroad, now it has come to India. Then only specialty like pediatrics, ophthalmology, and the Indian Journal of Anatomy, Physiology, Pharmacology, all those they are doing in their own small bits and pieces. But NMDI being a leader, I think it should focus on medical education to a greater extent. And I can assure you that on my part, I will be able to mobilize. If you say reviewers is the problem, there is already a small network of Academy of Health Profession Education. We have more than 100 people contacts there. We will motivate them to become reviewers. And if NMDI agrees, let us also hold a workshop for capacity building, because you know that the robustness of research in medical education is not, it's not robust, because people are not trained. People are more oriented to biomedical science and publication. So there is a need for training, hand-holding, capacity building, and if we can increase the number of articles acceptable, it will be a win-win situation, because there is a good number of people who are starving for publication and there are no avenues. So can NMDI consider this as a future proposal? That is my question. Thank you very much.
So Dr. Peush is logged out, but I will be sure to pass on this message from you to him on
Vidya,
one-to-one basis.
Vidya can ask Dr. Vinay Kumran to come in for a while.
Yes,
and
yes.
his comments on his experience with Dr. Nundy and NMJI. Vinay, can you?
Yeah, hi. Yes.
Can you put your camera on?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, that is a fake background. I'm actually sitting in my office. But I remember when I was preparing for the MCH entrance exams, I had some inside information in the form of Dr. P.K. Mishra, who was faculty at UCMS, where I was a senior resident. And he told me that one of the things they're going to ask in the entrance exam is, which journals do you regularly read? And he said it would be a good idea to plant Tropical Gastroenterology and National Medical Journal of India on that list. And in preparation for that, I started reading both of these. And I actually enjoyed reading many of the articles in the journals, and I continued to read them afterwards. So that was my introduction to NMJI. And I don't know if it helped me get into AIIMS, but it was my initial contact with the journal.
Thank you, Dr. Vinay. Dr. Reddy or Dr. Nundy, would you have any closing comments? It's 9:30.
Sure. I thought Dr. Ghosh wanted to come in on the preprint issue. Is that right?
Yes,
No,
Ghosh.
yeah, it's a, see, you put yourself there when the preprint issue comes, especially for COVID. One of the biggest fear has been that we have been keeping good evidence, good science, and usually the print is coming out 7, 8, 9 months later. Because of COVID and democratization of information, it was felt that if you have an information, why do you share it now? I completely endorse what Dr. Nundy is saying, that these are not really peer reviewed and there could be an issue, and it is. But it's also up to the people who are putting for preprint. Your work and your name is there for the whole world to look at. So you have to be careful as to what you publish. Our team had published several articles during COVID time, which was in preprint, and they were all, the younger faculty were all very happy to see their name, and we were saying that this has not been published yet. Most likely it won't. May or may not, who knows? But that's one of the things. I think it's up in the air, like social media, Twitter, Instagram, everything. It's there right now. You can take onto it. The importance is sometimes you can build in, because the way we search information now through Google and everything, you can see if your article is getting hits. You can work with collaborators from other parts of the world if they agree with your kind of work. And so that has a big benefit. On the other hand, my short talk on medical education articles, journals have been, especially biomedical journals, have been a bit hesitant for good reason, because medical education articles are more of how to do things. A lot of them are old information bottled into new information, and they're seen as may not moving the needle as fast as everything else. New England Journal never used to publish, Lancet never used to publish, but now because of the pressure, they are publishing educational articles, the really stellar ones, not how to do, what to do, but why to do, and the real cutting edge. But Mayo recently has come up with a new quality journal, because this same pressure where QI articles or innovations is going into that bucket rather than the Mayo proceedings, because of the enormous bioscience things which are being sent for being published. So it's a challenge that every editor has to balance based on the philosophy of the journal, what they want to reach. And so it is, there are new things we have to get used to, and preprint is one of them. There's no easy, I don't think it's going away anywhere soon. It's going to stay, even post-COVID.
Woody, did you want to say something? You popped your camera on. Dr. Ravi Shankar. You're muted. You're muted.
No. I just saw a question that said something about spotting fake journals. I'm not sure if that's been handled. If it's been answered, then it's fine.
I mean, it's kind of beyond the scope of today's thing. I will send, we can share the link of the talk where we discuss this in detail as to how to spot these fake journals. Dr. Reddy or Dr. Nundy, if you have any closing comments, we are kind of out of time.
No, one final comment is that basically, given the fact that many journals are now becoming online, and that's going to be the standard practice from now on, but also the fact that people are impatient with delays in getting published, and that's why preprints sometimes are seemingly attractive. We must ensure that there is a larger reviewer base across the world who are well trained in evaluating the quality of the articles, not only from the point of view of the technical content, but also the methodology. And therefore, the larger the number of well-qualified reviewers, the shorter the review time and the shorter the publication time. And with online journals, you can actually cut short the publication time quite markedly. And therefore, the need for preprints can be done away with, and the sanctity of peer review can be maintained.
Thank you so much for your comments, Dr. Nundy.
I want to end with a personal note, and the personal note is that people think that a doctor's job is based on patient care, teaching, and research and publication. And I have enjoyed most doing research and publication because it is so stimulating. You have contact with the whole world. You have to think about problems and you have to try and solve the problems. And I, at the risk of my Padma Award being upgraded, I must say that I feel that being a doctor in India is the best job in the world. You have very interesting patients who are always grateful. Your students think you're God, and you can publish, you can be part of something like the National Medical Journal of India. I'm very proud of it, and I'm very thankful to you for having this discussion.
Thank you so much for your kind words, sir. And we all are looking forward to your Padma Award being upgraded. We'll meet again next Thursday with yet another episode of Marvelous Medicine. As you all know, we also have a series running every Tuesday called Let's Learn Surgery, which is on pedagogy in surgery. So I welcome all of you to log in on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. We'll meet again next week. Till then, take care and stay safe. Good night.